The Subcommittee on East Asia and the Pacific and the Subcommittee on South and Central Asia will come to order. This joint hearing will assess the current situation in Burma, including the upcoming sham elections, the dire humanitarian situation facing the Rohingya community, and ways to address the proliferation of scam centers and fentanyl hurting the lives of everyday Americans. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Welcome to today's joint East Asia and the Pacific and South and Central Asia Subcommittee hearing on the ongoing military and humanitarian crisis in Burma, titled No Exit Strategy, Burma's Endless Crisis and America's Limited Options. This hearing aims to illuminate a prominent source of regional instability and a significant foreign policy opportunity for the United States. Burma is a failed state, rapidly becoming the world center of organized crime, with more than half of its population living in poverty, nearly 3.6 million people internally displaced, and millions more having fled to neighboring countries. Although resistance forces have achieved notable successes over the past year and a half, the junta remains resilient, still controlling about 20% of the country's land, while opposition forces control roughly twice that amount. Since Burma's military coup in 2021, the junta has only worked to further legitimize itself, despite some claims that it is in decline. The Tatmadaw, Burma's military junta, is slated to hold sham elections in December 2025, where the results are predetermined in a bid to disguise authoritarian control as democratic process. These elections are designed to create an illusion of legitimacy while allowing the junta to continue serving as a proxy for China and Russia. Both powers have aided the Tatmadaw's numerous war crimes by propping up the regime with weapons and surveillance technology. The United States has a moral obligation to call out and act against both human rights abuses and autocratic transgression. While cuts to foreign assistance have reduced our ability to assist in disasters and in the conflict writ large, the conflict presents an opportunity for the United States to strengthen its regional interests in regard to supply chain security, economic partnerships, and critical mineral initiatives. This hearing also addresses the direct and immediate consequences of Burma's conflict on the American people. Make no mistake, America's interests in this conflict are not humanitarian alone. Junta-affiliated scamming networks operating within Burma have targeted Americans, stealing billions of dollars a year from American taxpayers. These funds not only benefit transnational criminal networks, but continue to line the pockets of the military junta. Congress must act immediately to protect our citizens' hard-earned savings. Burma's humanitarian catastrophe is its strategic importance in Southeast Asia and the ongoing war's harmful effects on everyday Americans all demand a thorough reevaluation of the United States policy. Indeed, when we consider both the domestic and foreign policy implications of the crisis in Burma, greater American attention to the conflict and its outcome truly puts America first. To address these challenges, the committee has gathered an excellent panel of witnesses who will help us further unpack the many dimensions of Burma's conflict. So I look forward to engaging with them on this critical issue. Thank you. I now recognize Ranking Member Ami Bera to make his 5 minutes opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairwoman Kim and Chairman Huizenga and Ranking Member Kamlager-Dove for hosting a hearing on this important topic. And I want to thank the witnesses for joining us today. We're grateful for your expertise, and I look forward to your testimony. I won't reiterate everything that the chairwoman said, but I agree with everything that you did say in terms of the complexity of this conflict and the ongoing is, there's no easy solution here. You pointed out the importance of calling out these sham elections that are coming up. These are not legitimate, free and fair elections. These are elections where the junta is trying to legitimize themselves. We have to make sure we call out the elections for what they are. Also, you talked about the scam centers that are preying upon U.S. citizens, but also are funding the military junta. That is a real challenge as well, and it's something that not just the United States, but it is impacting Southeast Asia and other ASEAN nations. This is an area where we should be working closely together to try to disrupt these organized crime networks and scam centers. The other thing that I'd like to touch on also is what we see in terms of the PRC supporting some of the junta, providing military aid and others. This is an area where we should use the full power of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, to continue to put pressure on the Chinese and others, including bringing in the Indians who also are, seeing the cross-border refugee crisis, to work together to try to find an end. And lastly, from the beginning of the conflict in 2021, we've worked closely with the ASEAN nations, the Southeast Asian nations. I recently met with the Indonesian ambassador, welcoming the new ambassador here. We did talk about next steps in how we can support ASEAN to find a resolution to this. And it's not just a resolution. We've seen the resilience of the Burmese people in terms of fighting for their liberty and freedom and a path forward. It's been remarkable that they've been able to sustain this for this long. This is an opportunity to try to facilitate real change where we can empower the people of Burma to find their path forward. Will not be easy. It will take partnership with the other Southeast Asian nations. It'll take ASEAN leadership, and then the other partner neighboring nations that have a real stake here, Bangladesh, India, and others. So again, thank you for this timely hearing. I think it is important. This is an incredibly complicated and complex challenge, but this is also an opportunity if we work together with like-valued allies, with the ASEAN nations. Hopefully we can affect a more positive outcome down the road and in the future. So thank you, Chairwoman Kim, and I yield back.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from South and Central Asia Subcommittee, gentleman from Michigan, Representative Huizenga, for your opening statement.
Well, thanks, Chair Kim, and I'm thrilled to be able to do this this hearing with you and to pull in the folks from South Central Asia Committee, as well as your vital committee. And interestingly enough, yesterday I met with the quite new ambassador from Bangladesh. And my goal with that meeting was to first and foremost say thank you for what Bangladesh is doing in Cox's Bazar. The number is now, he informs me, 1.3 million Rohingya that are there. They have about 35,000 births per year and still an approximately 100,000 refugees coming across per year. And so there is certainly a strain on whether it's Bangladesh, and as my friend Ami Bera had mentioned, India as well, and others in that region who are helping. Madam Chair, I've mentioned many times before in this committee, our Foreign Affairs Committee, as well as the Financial Services Committee, where I'm vice chair, that the Burma issues are near and dear to my heart, as well as the heart of my constituency, especially those constituents at the Battle Creek Burma Center in Southwest Michigan. That is what prompted me to really take a much more focused look at what is going on. And year after year, I've heard their stories and their desire for an end to the violence perpetuated by the junta, and they want to promote an open and inclusive democratic system and return to a safe and stable and secure Burma. And I know that's the goal of a few of our guests that are here in the audience with us today. And without objection, Madam Chair, I'd like to submit for the record a letter addressed to this committee from more than 90 civil society organizations regarding the situation in Burma. They write in their letter, it went to both the House Foreign Affairs Committee as well as the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, quote, "Burma's military has always been and remains today the single greatest source of instability and economic destruction in the country," close quote. Sadly, I think those words ring very true. And unfortunately, since February 2021, when a military coup replaced the democratically elected government in Burma, these desires for a new Burma are a long way from being fully realized. Protests and general strikes from pro-democracy advocates led the military regime's indiscriminate crackdown, including the killing of protesters and previously elected leaders, and airstrikes against schools, IDP camps, and civilian infrastructure, all of which manifests into human rights violations perpetuated by the oppressive and illegitimate military regime. The civil war between the military junta and the ethnic resistance organizations rages on, wreaking havoc across the country. And thanks to unfettered arms supply line from Russia and China, the military regime controls the airspace. And just last week, the military junta took delivery of Russian helicopters and Chinese military aircraft, which will ultimately be used to fight resistance forces and civilians in the mountainous regions of the country. The junta's grasp on its territory has become so desperate, the junta activated mandatory conscription last year, forcibly recruiting Rohingya Muslims to fight on the regime's behalf or to use them as human shields, even as the regime has long persecuted the Rohingya themselves. In the junta's latest ploy to build legitimacy around their illegitimate regime, a first-of-its-kind election has been called for December 28 of this year, 2025. As co-chair of the Congressional Burma Caucus, I have significant concerns about the lack of electoral rules and structures in this deeply flawed process. Additionally, the enactment of a recent July 2025 election protection law targets anyone who speaks out or protests against the election and threatens years of imprisonment or even death for those that are convicted. This move only further chills the democratic process in Burma. To say that these elections are shaping up to be free or fair is delusional. Moving forward, the United States' strong voice and stalwart leadership could have a lasting impact on the region. I've frankly been encouraged by the Trump administration's interest in the region, including multiple rounds of sanctions designated from Treasury targeting Burmese armed groups with links to scam compounds and a Burmese arms procurement network linked to North Korea. Additionally, since October, this administration has pledged over $130 million for the Rohingya refugee crisis and pushed 11 countries to increase their aid response to the Rohingya by more than 10%. In terms of assistance, the United States has provided more than a third of all aid to the Rohingya Humanitarian Crisis Joint Response Plan in 2025, more than double than that of any nation. I see my time is running out. But I just want to add again, I'm encouraged to see the July 2025 Quad Summit joint statement on bringing much needed international attention to the Burma crisis. More can and should be done by this administration and our global partners to stop the bleeding in Burma. So I look forward to our conversation today, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize the ranking member of South and Central Asia Subcommittee, my dear friend from California, Representative Sydney Kamlager-Dove.
Well, thank you, Madam and Mr. Chair, for bringing us together for this joint bipartisan hearing so we can speak with one voice on this important topic. The conflict in Burma reverberates far beyond its borders, and I want to focus especially on the instability it creates in South Asia. The largest refugee encampment in the world is in Bangladesh, home to a forgotten crisis, the 1.5 million Rohingya refugees who fled ethnic cleansing at the hands of the Burmese military junta in what the United States determined to be a genocide in 22. For the Rohingya, Rakhine State in Burma is their motherland and their home. But for decades, they have been treated as outsiders in their own land, targeted by the military, maligned by other Burmese ethnic minorities, and stripped of their citizenship. The Rohingya are now the world's largest stateless population, a status passed down from one generation to the next. Years after renewed ethnic cleansing and the outbreak of civil war, the Rohingya in Burma are still the large target of brutal genocidal violence. The Arakan Army, an ethnic armed organization that resumed fighting the military junta in late 23, has massacred the Rohingya in territory under its control. This has forced an additional 150,000 Rohingya to seek safety in Bangladesh in the past 18 months alone. In Cox's Bazar, however, the Rohingya confront another harrowing set of challenges. Bangladesh, which faces major strains on its state capacity, has demonstrated incredible generosity in hosting the Rohingya refugees, a responsibility that must be shouldered by the entire international community. And while we all share the same goal for the Rohingya to live safely as equal citizens in their home country, policies to ensure that the refugee camps remain a temporary solution have in many ways had the opposite effect. Instead, it has deprived the Rohingya of their agency to build a life for themselves and end their reliance on government and international support. The Rohingya do not have the right to work or the freedom of movement to leave the camps. They have limited access to any livelihood or educational opportunities, depriving them of the right to human development. They are not permitted to build permanent structures, resulting in vulnerability to flooding, landslides, and fires, and constant costly rebuilding. Insecurity in the camps has exploded as armed groups battle for dominance and traffic young Rohingya into prostitution, slavery, or conscription in the Burmese military. Women and girls are disproportionately impacted, as always, with an uptick in gender-based violence and child marriages as conditions deteriorate. The Rohingya crisis requires sustained U.S. leadership to support the Bangladesh government, ensure robust assistance and improvements to the humanitarian response, and to find permanent solutions for many of the Rohingya. Alleviating the pressure on Bangladesh's limited state capacity is essential to promoting stability in the country, as the interim government works to rebuild from past authoritarian rule and manage its political transition ahead of elections next year. While I was glad to see the administration announce new funding pledges to support Rohingya refugees, the $168 million the administration provided in fiscal year 25 is less than half of the $354.5 million the United States provided in 24, even as humanitarian needs arise. Such a significant funding cut will directly impact the lives of Rohingya, whose food rations amount to about $12 a day. The U.S. must also work with the Bangladesh government and our partners in the region to improve conditions for the Rohingya, both within the camps and to find sustainable solutions outside the camps. This, first and foremost, requires a cohesive regional strategy that goes beyond the singular focus on tariffing our partners or pursuing a Nobel Peace Prize. Resettling Rohingya refugees to safe third countries is an essential part of this effort. If the State Department is engaging other countries to accept U.S. deportation flights, they should also be working with partners to resettle stranded refugees into a long-term solution. With newly confirmed leadership in the South and Central Asia Bureau, I hope to see sustained diplomatic engagement and resource prioritization for the Rohingya refugee crisis. And I am ready to work with the administration on a bipartisan basis to push for sustained solutions for the Rohingya, especially as Bangladesh elects a new government early next year. I look forward to today's robust discussion and how we can work together to address the Rohingya crisis and the conflict in Burma that is driving it. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. And I would like to note that other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. And we are pleased to have a distinguished panel of witnesses before us today on this very important topic. The Honorable Kelley Currie, non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Indo-Pacific Security Initiative. Thanks for being with us. Steve Ross is a senior fellow from the Stimson Center. Thank you for being with us. Lucky Karim, the executive director of Refugee Women for Peace and Justice. Appreciate you joining us today. This committee recognizes the importance of the issues before us, and we are grateful to have you here to speak with us today. Your full statements will be made part of the record, and I'll ask each of you to keep your spoken remarks to 5 minutes in order to allow time for member questions. I now recognize Ambassador Currie for your opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman, and ranking members, and other members of the committee for hosting and convening this important hearing at a time when the world is largely ignoring what's happening in Burma. I've worked on Burma for 3 decades. This is both the most depressing and most hopeful I've been about Burma, and I think you can read my full statement to understand a little bit of why. I must first clarify that my remarks solely represent my personal views and not any of the many organizations with which I'm affiliated, and I do refer you to my full statement for my entire remarks. I'm going to focus on a few recommendations. I think that one of the things that is really key to understanding what is going on in Burma right now is that you have these trends that all of the committee leadership spoke about in terms of the scam centers. They did not mention rare earth mining, but that is another big issue for Burma. There are just a number of intersecting conflict economies that are fueling this war. And the main beneficiary of these conflict economies and the war itself is not even the Burmese junta at this point. It is the People's Republic of China. I think that it is important to understand that China wants to see Burma weak, divided, and dependent. That is their objective. That is what they are trying to accomplish through their proxies, whether it's the United Wa State Army or their occasional intervention to support and backstop the military regime, the continuous flow of weapons that they provide the military regime. They want to see the junta successfully pull off these elections and bring a level of stability that allows them to continue to do business and pull resources out of Burma without the costs that they're having to deal with right now, the annoying problems of the conflict that Beijing has to bear. At the same time, when it comes to the scam centers and the rare earth mining, Beijing is rapacious in the way that they deal with these things. The scam centers could not exist without the support that the regime in Beijing provides to them. These scam centers are largely the guts, the backbone behind them. And this is a $35 billion a year global industry. I want to be clear about that, and growing quickly. They are using technology in a way that is astounding. AI, they were just rated and had hundreds of Starlink units powering their internet. They are at the center of a web of some of the worst human trafficking I've ever seen in 30 years working on human rights, and most abusive human trafficking system. And they are deeply connected, and this is one thing I think we don't really understand very well or talk about. These scam centers started out as a way to launder money, including drug money from the Mexican cartels. They've become a line of business on their own, but at heart, they're really a massive money laundering organization that benefits the very cartels that are killing Americans with fentanyl. And there's an increasing link between the cartels and the fentanyl production in the Western Hemisphere and the drug production and these transnational Chinese criminal organizations that are underlying this entire web of global illicit activities. And Burma is at the center of it. And it is a strange place to be at the center of a global network of criminality, but because of the disaggregated sovereignty in parts of Burma and the lawlessness, it has become the perfect breeding ground for these activities. So this is a national security threat to the United States, as the leadership mentioned. We do have tools we can use, whether it's with our ally Thailand or our adversary Beijing, to ratchet down pressure on these activities. We need to stop removing sanctions on Burma's arms dealers. We need to make clear that we will not recognize their illicit and illegal election. But at the end of the day, much of the source of the problem for what we're dealing with in Burma derives from across the border in the People's Republic of China. And we need to understand that as we start to think about the solutions that this committee and the administration put forward. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. That's very, very powerful statement, and we've taken a lot of notes, and I really look forward to engaging you in questions afterwards. Thank you. I now recognize Ms. Karim for your opening statement.
Thank you, Madam and Mr. Chairman. My name is Karim. I'm a member of the Rohingya community from Burma. I'd like to start by thanking members of the committee for holding this hearing and for passing the Burma Genocide and Accountability Protection Act, or Burma GAP Act, out of committee. I was forced to flee my home at the age of 14 in August 2017 when the Burmese military waged a genocidal attack against the Rohingya people in Rakhine State. As a child, I lived in the world's largest refugee settlement in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh for 6 years. The Burmese military regime has been persecuting the Rohingya in Myanmar for decades. Since the military coup in Myanmar in February 2021, the political, economic, and humanitarian crisis in the country has only grown more dire for the Rohingya as well as other ethnic minorities in Burma. The remaining members of the Rohingya community in Rakhine State are dying from hunger. Internally displaced people have zero access to humanitarian aid. And the genocidal violence continues even to this day. As a result, tens of thousands of people have been forced to flee their homes since 2023, bringing the total population of people languishing in the Cox's Bazar camps to more than 1.3 million. I only have 5 minutes for this testimony, but I could spend the entire day listing the abuses suffered by the other ethnic and religious groups in Burma. Not only Rohingya Muslim, but also Shang, Karen, Kachin, Moin, Karenni, Rakhine, Shin, Christian, Buddhist, and Hindu all across our diverse nation have endured years of persecution, war crimes, and indiscriminate violence by the Burmese military. All minorities have suffered and all need to be part of the democratization process. Despite the reality on the ground, Burma's military regime is planning a sham election next month. This election will never be free or fair. It is only the way for the military regime to seek international legitimacy. Our risky journeys out of Myanmar in pursuit of a better life did not start when the genocidal attacks against us began in 2017. People have been fleeing in persecution since at least the 1970s, forced to be refugees in neighboring countries like Bangladesh or elsewhere. I traveled back to Bangladesh refugee camps 2 times this year. When I was there in February, the World Food Program was preparing to announce cuts to food ration for refugees to go down from $12 to just $6 per month for each individual. This is a cut that would have had devastating consequences. Thankfully, the United States has stepped up to continue funding, but that funding will only last a few more months. Meanwhile, the closing of USAID and broader aid cuts have forced health clinics, learning centers, and other programs to close. People in Cox's Bazar camps are fully dependent on the food ration that they receive once a month because the majority of them have zero earnings. There are no livelihood opportunities for families in the camps. The government of Bangladesh, long a generous host to Rohingya refugees, has done much for my community. But expanding access to livelihood and education would do perhaps more than any other policy to ensure a safe and sustainable future for the Rohingya community. In our homeland, most urgently, too many of our people continue to die due to violence and hunger. The international community and the US government must act now to pressure the Myanmar military to stop its attacks and to allow aid into Rakhine and other areas across the country, facing high levels of food insecurity as we consider the future for my community. Repatriation to our ancestral homeland is the ultimate solution. It has been said before by myself and many other Rohingya, but bears repeating, we the Rohingya community want to go back to our homeland in Rakhine State when it is safe to do so. Here is what the US government can do more to help us. Congress should pass the Burma Genocide Accountability and Protection Act, or the Burma GAP Act, which lays out a comprehensive policy for addressing many of the crises affecting our country. It would support refugees and internally displaced people. It would address the need for accountability for genocide and crimes against humanity by the Burmese military. It will also promote long-term solutions for the Rohingya, such as citizenship rights, safe and voluntarily return to Burma, inclusion in a future federal democratic system. The bill also authorized the creation of a U.S. Special Representative for Burma and calls on the administration to refuse to recognize the Burmese military as the country's legitimate government. This is so important ahead of the sham elections scheduled for next month. Congress should also call for the immediate restoration of the U.S. refugee resettlement program. I'm one of a few who have benefited from the kindness of the American people and America's history for resettling refugees. It has given me and many others the opportunity to speak up on the wall stage in support of my community. And the United States should continue to engage the Bangladesh government towards providing education and livelihood opportunities for Rohingya refugees. I would like to end here with a question for you. What will it take for my people to be able to live freely and securely in our home in Burma? And when the future generation of Rohingya look back, will they still be asking the same question, or will they be home at last, asking simply what took so long? Thank you.